Hi everybody, today we are talking about one of the most common pieces of writing advice you will find. If you spend any time studying creative writing or looking for writing advice, you've probably come across that, and this is show don't tell. I talked in one of my previous videos about how I tend to be somewhat cynical of any rule that says you should never do this thing, because you can usually find great examples where writers have broken the rule and done so very effectively. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the rule is, what it means, and some of the situations where you might want to break it. Let's start with what it means. Sometimes if you're just getting started out writing, you come across this rule. It seems a bit confusing being told not to tell, given that a lot of writing is telling a story. That is what we're doing as writers. So the difference is telling is basically stating a fact. This is a thing. This is a thing that happened. This person feels this way. The door is red. It is simply stating an action, event, a feeling as a sort of summary. Showing is giving a scene that lets the person reading it witness things and come to the same conclusion as the thing that you could have told. So, for example, you might have a tell where John made dinner for his roommate. That is telling. You can expand it. John made dinner for his roommate and it came out burned. But it's still just telling. The showing would be John's in the kitchen, he's thinking about how much he likes his roommate, or maybe he's thinking how annoyed he is that he's always doing this and his roommate never helps out and never cooks dinner. He's picking out ingredients, he's checking whether this particular ingredient's still within its sell-by date, he's chopping them up, he's throwing them in the pan, he's getting distracted because he gets a text, and then, oh no, that's that smell, it's burning. You've got a lot more going on, and you get to see things like, is he okay with the fact it's burned because he's annoyed at his roommate, and who cares if the roommate gets something a little bit off? Or is he really upset because he actually really likes his roommate and he wants to show off and wants to do something nice and helpful, and now it's all ruined because it's black and it's burned? You've got a lot more going on, and you can have that entire scene without ever actually mentioning the word dinner. You can show that that is what is going on because of the actions. You can have all of that there. So the showing is giving a much more elaborate, a much more detailed, and a much more engaging part of the story. So in terms of something being engaging, this is one of the reasons why people tell you to show, because we get inside the character's head, we feel what they're feeling, we feel more invested, and we can feel more invested in things that happen later. So let's say we're not talking about dinner, let's say Anna is bullying Elizabeth. We can say Anna bullied Elizabeth, we can tell people that, or we can show a scene where Anna is saying mean things, she's pulling her hair, she's poking her, she's trying to get her in trouble, and we can see how upset Elizabeth as the bullied character is feeling. We can feel how horrible it is to have to suffer in this way. And as the reader, you get a much more emotional investment. And if, at the end of the story, the bully gets her comeuppance, she's punished for it, we feel the vindication, we feel the satisfaction at seeing that resolution a lot more than if we were simply told that the bullying was going on. So that is absolutely one of the main reasons why this advice is given and why it is so pervasive. Because when you show, you're inviting your reader in, giving them a connection to the character, and helping them feel more invested and more involved in the story. You can use this to immerse the characters in the world of the story, in the setting of the story. So you can tell your reader that the characters are in a place that's got a beautiful, large, ornate garden, or you can show the reader your character walking through the gardens, noticing the bright colours of the flowers, the scents, this wonderful piece of statuary in the middle of a fountain. You can have a scene showing how wonderful it all is, and including little details that grab the attention and make it come alive. Or you can just tell the reader that, hey, the garden's great. The second one, the showing example, is much more likely to make it feel real, to make the gardens feel so beautiful and elaborate, because they've experienced it alongside the character. Now, the problem with that, and the reason why you might want to actually start breaking this rule, is because that's going to take a lot longer. The showing is usually a few paragraphs at least. It could be a few pages, a whole chapter, whereas the telling can be a few words. And if you're writing something where the main focus is the plot, there's lots of action, you want to get to the next big event, actually taking a few pages out to go and sniff the flowers might frustrate your readers more than it engages them. And this is where you can actually start combining the two techniques. So you can tell your reader that there is this wonderful garden. You can then drop little pieces of showing in between the action. So you tell your readers there's a beautiful garden, that sets some expectation. You can then have a scene where there's a jewel on a path between elaborately sculpted topiary bushes, and you are showing a detail that reinforces what you told. And you can do this little bits at a time. You can have lots of action happening, you can have your characters having a heated argument or a romantic moment in this garden, and show little hints at the beauty. And because the reader's been told that there's this beautiful garden, these little aspects of showing just reinforces that picture and drives it home. But you don't have to show the whole thing all at once. So this combination of setting the expectation with telling and then reinforcing with showing sort of lets you get the best of both worlds. The challenge is, or the important thing is, that it's got to be consistent. If you tell people that the garden's wonderful and then you show it full of garbage and overgrown and tangled and everything's horrible and rotting, you are creating this disconnect. And that's usually something you want to avoid. However, in a previous video I talked about unreliable narrators, and actually this is a great technique to reinforce that a narrator is unreliable. Your narrator might tell the reader, I'm a really generous person, but then you might show in scenes the character walking past beggars without paying attention, stiffing somebody on the tip, taking the last donut from the box. You can show something that is directly contradictory to the thing that's been told. And this is a great way of establishing that the person doing the telling is not necessarily to be trusted. So this is actually one of the techniques you can use with unreliable narrators. It's where you have the show and the tell in direct conflict. Most of the time, however, if you're going to combine them, you want them to match up. So that's a couple of reasons why you might use telling, but another reason is sheer number of words. And I've talked about some of these examples and talked about how the showing example is going to be longer. And one of the questions to ask yourself is it important that I show this? You might say, this character's going to the shop. Or you might show the character putting on their shoes, leaving the house, going back because they realise they forgot their reusable shopping bag, going out again, walking down the street to the shop. You've got a lot more going on in the showing, but does it actually matter? If the important thing is what happens actually at the shop, you can skip over all of that preamble with a sentence of telling. Telling is great for summarising stuff you can just skip over. Like the bullying example I gave earlier. If the point of the story is that this character has been bullied and they get their revenge, or they learn that they are a lovable person despite the bullying, or they decide that they want to help out another person they see being bullied, then that bullying scene is probably really important and something you could show. But if the bully character is somebody who's sort of in the story for 2 pages and they're never seen again, it's probably not that important. You can probably skip over it with a sentence of telling. It's up to you as the writer to decide, is this important or is this not important? And you focus your time and your effort on the showing when it comes to those important things. This is particularly important if you write short fiction. A short story, you might only have a couple of thousand words to get across everything you want in terms of plot, setting, character development, all of that. If you spend a few hundred of those showing something which is of insignificant importance to the story, you're going to struggle to find the words to focus on the stuff that really does matter. So in particular in short fiction, but it can work, it can apply just as well to novellas and novels as well. If you are writing a story, you can show absolutely everything and your story will end up hundreds of thousands of words long. Or you can focus on showing the stuff where there is emotional impact, where there is action happening, where something is important for the plot or the character growth. Show those parts in detail and use telling to just jump over the other bits. So as I said, this is a common piece of advice, and yeah, sometimes showing is absolutely important, but other times, yeah, a little bit of telling just lets you get to the important bits quicker. So let me know what you think. If you've got any other good examples of when you might want to tell rather than show, leave a note in the comment below. Likewise, leave a note if you've got any suggestions of other topics you want to see me cover. And as I mentioned last week, next weekend I will be at Bath Comic Con, which is in the Bath Pavilion. I will have a table in the ballroom if anybody wants to come to me and talk about books. I'm also thinking for the 3-month anniversary of this YouTube channel to do a Your Questions Answered video. So if you do have any questions, it can be about my writing, my original fiction, it can be writing advice in general, my favourite books, any subject that is vaguely related to writing. Leave a note in the comment or drop me a message with your question and I will include that in the Your Questions Answered video in a few weeks' time. I will see you next week.